I think that at the end of the Cold War, all of us thought that we were going to have a peaceful world. And in fact, we don't. 59 wars are presently being fought. And of these, many of them have to do with differences in religious faith. Today, I want to talk about the possibility of having interfaith dialogue and intercultural dialogue. Professor Saeed is the director of the Center for Global Peace at American University in Washington, D.C. He also founded the Center for Peace and Reconciliation at the same university. He is an advisor both to governments and to individuals. He has written 16 books, and among them are Revolutionism, Protagonists for Change, Concepts of International Politics in Global Perspective. Bishop Swing is the Episcopal Bishop of the California Diocese, and he has also started the United Religions Initiative to promote peace and understanding among religions all over the world. He travels all over the world as a pilgrim for peace among other religions. And religious wars have been going on for so long. And I think one of the things I want to understand is the basic problem. Are these wars really fought over religion, or is religion being co-opted for political gain?
I think religion is part of it. Religion fuels conflicts. I think way, way, way down deep in religion, in some religions, there's a desire for conquest, for everyone to be on our team. And therefore, it's almost like athletic competition. We have to win. And we have to bring everybody on board on our team for God's sake or for religion's sake or whatever.
I mean, let me follow in your footsteps, Bill. For me, there are two religions on the planet. They cut across every religion, open and closed. The closed religions are religions that limit themselves to honoring form and not more than that. Form is to be honored. But the open religions, they honor form, but they also realize that the purpose of form is to be able to transcend form to the essence. And when it comes to the essence, it's all one. So when people talk about clash of civilizations or clash of religions, for me, they are talking about clash of forms. Because at the deepest level, they are one.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the thoughts I've had on this subject would be that most of us learned religion in a tribal setting. You know, I learned it in an Episcopal tribe. You might have learned it in a Sufi Muslim tribe. And that's fine as long as we're living in tribes. But now that we live together side by side all over the world, we have to learn God not just in a tribal sense, but in a global sense and in a universal sense, which means all religions are going to be challenged to ratchet up to a new level. We will all have to learn God in a more expansive context, which is very threatening. And I think that people who are more militant fundamentalists see this coming and see the challenge of that and are fighting desperately to bring people back to the tribe and to try to get one tribe to beat the other tribe.
But what is it that's so threatening about someone having a different belief system?
As I discover my authentic individuality, as I discover who I am, as I discover my more authentic self, I become more appreciative of the genuine uniqueness of others. What we call fundamentalism operates both on the political and religious level. We see it on the religious level. When a people are threatened, they take their belief system, be it Islam, Christianity, or Judaism, reduce it to a narrow formula to separate themselves from others. On the political level, when a people or a nation finds itself hegemonic, as we are, we practice political fundamentalism. We take our general belief system, Western liberalism, we reduce it to a narrow formula to justify our own hegemony. So for me, it is a perception of threat which is a function of not having discovered one's genuine spirit.
Well, that has to do with growing up. It takes some pretty grown-up people to know that. But Bill, you told me a story the other day. It was very helpful for me anyway, about people's relationship to their pew.
Aziz, I was talking about a person going into a church and saying their prayers, sitting in the same pew every day. Mm-hmm. And that's where they meet God. Mm-hmm. And then they come in someday and somebody's sitting in their pew. Mm-hmm. And they have to sit someplace else, and they're disgruntled because they know that God speaks to them over here, but they're not sure God speaks to them over here. Mm-hmm. So they have to displace this person so they can get back. It's the whole idea of the exclusivity of one's experience of the divine. Mm-hmm. If God has spoken to me here, is it possible that God spoke to somebody else over there? Is it possible that the symbols that I understand are not the symbols that they understand?
Well, this is the thing. I would like to know why each of you think there has been this tremendous rise in fundamentalism today. What started this off?
Well, I think behind that question is a political question, because fundamentalism has been around for a long time. It's never not been around. There was a time where Islam and Christianity were at the gates of Vienna in 1683, and it was, is Europe and the West going to be Muslim, or is it going to be Christian? And that question was put to rest, not completely, but kind of under the surface.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the relationship between Islam and the West for more than 200 years, it was a relationship of non-equals. The West, technologically superior. And as they emerged from that relationship after World War II, Islam and the West, that relationship of non-equals has blemished their context. Islam emerges from that relationship insecure, and the West emerges from that relationship insensitive and feeling superior, and the Islamic world feels insecure and defensive. So much of the behavior of Muslims now is a behavior that emanates from a position of weakness, a feeling of weakness.
Right.
So in this relationship between Islam and the West, a relationship it has become a cycle of arrogance breeding contempt on the one hand, and defensiveness and security breeding paranoia on the other hand.
Maybe you should tell us about the United Religions Initiative, because you mentioned you were going to Korea.
Well, when the United Nations came to San Francisco in 1995, I was in charge of hosting and also bringing religions together so that we could have one service with all the nations and all the religions at the same time. And as I was working on that, it dawned on me that nations have met together for 50 years every day to struggle together for global good.
Mm-hmm.
Religions of the world in those same 50 years haven't spoken to each other
Mm-hmm.
and have no common vocation that takes in the good of the world together.
Mm-hmm.
So I had decided I would commit the rest of my life to being a catalyst for the creation of something. So it's a United Religions Initiative as a first step. And we decided that rather than go with the Pope and the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop of Canterbury, we'd go down to the grassroots. We decided we would create an organism rather than an organization,
Mm-hmm.
where the greatest amount of authority would be invested in the smallest unit, and little units could crop up all over the world who would adhere to the purpose and principles and then take off in any direction they wanted. So the purpose is to promote daily, enduring interfaith cooperation to end religiously motivated violence and to create cultures of peace, justice, and healing
Mm-hmm.
for the earth and all
Okay.
living beings.
Okay.
And if you can deal with that, then you could form anything you want and take off. And we figured that the world's going to be so frustrated with religion that people are going to find each other and they're going to create cultures of peace.
Mm-hmm.
So we signed the charter in the year 2000, and now we have about 300 cooperation circles, and we've got offices on 5 continents, and we get 1 million hits a month on our website, and we're growing like a weed.
Good.
And it grows itself. So I'm going to Korea this week for our global council, and there'll be people from probably 50 countries in the world and probably 40 religions, and we'll work on governance.
Well,
I
I would
love
like to definitely support that. I'm involved in my university in a project we call it Total Peace.
Mm.
Throughout history, peace has been conceptualized, conceived by the dominant culture and imposed by the dominant military power. Meaning, throughout history, we have never had a total concept of peace. The dominant culture, the dominant power, projects its security initiatives. Now, in what you are doing and what we are trying to do in our Total Peace project, glean from various cultures, various civilizations, what is peace to them? What does peace mean to them? What's social justice for them? What's poverty for them? To be concrete and work on a total conception of peace. How do we evolve a conception of peace that is reflective of values of various cultures, various civilizations? That's a very hard one.
When I get to Korea, I have to give a talk. on-
Let's stay in touch with
Yeah.
that, because you can help us a great deal. I mean,
Yeah.
for example, in my university, we have a whole program on Islamic peace paradigms. Not just in theory, but in practice. Where have they failed? Where have they succeeded? What can we learn from them? I tell my Muslim brothers and sisters, they should send more Lawrence of Arabias to the West to have a better appreciation of the struggles of Christianity for the last 200 years, how they have evolved in the way they have evolved. And for Americans and Westerns to go to the East and also try to appreciate the context of the East. Look at us now, the United States. Our tendency when we look at big events, conflict, war in the Middle East, in the Islamic world, we focus on trying to understand those events in terms of interplay of forces, technologies, economics, balance of power, all of it real. But we don't look at sisterhoods, brotherhoods, feelings, emotions. So what happens by deleting that, we reduce a complex phenomenon into simplistic interpretations and give them names.
Well, Bishop Swing has a nice story about the women whose children died, the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Yes, so little cooperation circles are springing up around the world, and one of them started in Jerusalem with a Jewish woman who lost a son into the Intifada, and a Palestinian woman who lost her son to the Jewish military, or the Israeli military. And both of these women came to the same conclusion, that they could spend the rest of their life in bitterness, or they would get to know who that other person is. So these two women and a Maronite woman came together and they said, why don't we form a cooperation circle? So they started out not by, you're going to love this, not by talking about doctrine. They started out by eating. I knew you'd love that.
So that's true.
So they
That's
said,
good.
bring your recipe and come to our house and we'll teach you our food.
It's the beginning of making friends, eating together.
Hospitality.
Yes. I think one of the things we should think about is what do we know about, the different reconciliation and apology and the different things that can be transferred to this kind of dialogue.
A great Californian, Carl Rogers, the psychologist.
Sure.
I had the pleasure of working with him back in the late 80s, early 90s with the US and Nicaragua. And we were involved together in Rust, Austria with Americans and Nicaraguans. And he was involved in facilitating the meetings. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, nothing was happening. And Carl Rogers,
He could wait forever.
we sat with him and he said, guys, he said, it's not going anyplace. Wednesday evening, the government of Austria invited all of us for the new wine, the new season of wine. And while we were all enjoying the wine with their sausages, the representative from Nicaragua produced a photograph of his son from his pocket. And he looked at the American representative and said, I don't want you to kill my son. And it so happened, the American representative also had a photograph. And he looked at the Nicaraguan, he said, let's make an agreement. Why don't I, next vacation, I will send you my son and you send me your son. True story.
Boy.
At that moment, the whole discourse became real, because until then it was our national interest against your national interest, abstractions, national honor, national. But when it became concrete and real.
Oh, that's a really nice story.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And you know,
And
all
I've
these
had the
stories
same
are the
experience
human
with
level. It's when one person connects to another. But I do want to talk about Jerusalem, because one of the strange things about it is that this place where I think three great traditions could meet to say this is Holy Land together for each of us, everybody's fighting. Why is that? Could we just talk about what goes on in Jerusalem?
Both sides are caught in their pain. Both sides are caught in a hyper-coherent perspective. What I mean by that, by a very specific, narrow perspective. So for those of us doing peace work, one first step for us is how to help persons caught in pain to get out of their pain. That's a tough one. When I have a headache, I could take aspirin. But in situations of conflict, how do we get people out of pain? Because both sides embrace their pain. Both sides embrace their pain. As you were saying, it's deeply embedded. And how do we work with social healing? Because social healing is a process of rediscovering the whole again. Because what happens, the self becomes fragmented. how do we rediscover the whole? So to go back to your point, what do you do? Acknowledgement on both sides for Palestinians and Israelis to acknowledge each other's pain. You have to do that before apology, before forgiveness. And then you have to move after that.
When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, from our point of view, our religion, the soldiers came to him in the middle of the night, and they started to arrest him, and they were going to kill him, or have him killed. And so one of Jesus' followers picked up a sword, whacked off somebody's ear, and Jesus says 4 words which we've never heard, but he said them, and they're right there in the scripture. And he said, "No more of this." Never again will a follower of mine lift a sword to kill somebody to protect me. I will live into my vulnerability, and you have to live into my vulnerability also. And then, so we have great Christian armies to defend Jesus, and Jesus doesn't want any defense. Don't do this. No more of this.
Good, isn't it? Well, how do you think we can make people feel more safe in the world? Because obviously the basis of fundamentalism, the basis of the troubles that we're talking about is fear. So how do you think we can work towards people feeling more safe? What does safety consist of?
Or security.
Whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Yes.
The business of security, we can never make the United States as secure as some people want, with Star Wars and, the Patriot Act and on and where does it all end? And the issue is, we're never going to build a fail-safe, secure protection for ourselves. The only ultimate possibility is a rich relationship. If we build rich relationships with our enemies, we got a chance.
There is, looking at us, our nation, the United States, there is for me the notion of strong America and brave America. And I prefer brave America, because strong America projects security as the essence of peace. But brave America is an America that recognizes that coercion ultimately brings more coercion. It's replacing, moving from coercion to cooperation and consensus. So I see what you are saying.
Well, maybe the most important question to ask is, what do you believe that the Christians need to understand and do to make a better world with the Muslims? And similarly, what do the Muslims need to understand and do to create harmony with the Christians? And I think that's...
There's got to be a new conversion. It's not a conversion to my side. It's a conversion of, can't we build something together that's larger than the two of us separated?
Yeah, that's what you were mentioning earlier, Bo. Dialogue. For me, dialogue is knowledge to create new knowledge. For me, dialogue brings out the hidden treasures. For me, dialogue helps us understand that the whole world needs the whole world. And those who resist dialogue proceed from an assumption of scarcity, that there isn't enough to go around.
Right.
There's enough to go around. Historically, relationships of Muslims, Westerners, North, South, was a relationship of exploitation. North goes south, south goes north, in a spirit of exploitation. In dialogue, America goes to the Arabs and Muslims, giving them the best America has in exchange of getting from the Arabs the best that they have. So that's when you talk about knowing one another. To really know one another in that depth, there's the dialogue of dignity.
But please, I just want to say that one of the things that comes up for me when you talk about dialogue is that we have to be coming from the same place. In other words, we have to be coming from the same kind of education or the same kind of thinking. And I just wanted to address that before we got completely away from it, because both of you have been talking about it in a way as though one is talking with peers. And one of the difficulties, it seems to me, is one isn't in the world today always.
For me, there are at least 3 pillars for dialogue. One, a recognition of abundance, not scarcity, that there's enough to go around. 2, civility. But to get there, you are right, you have to go the 3rd, the skill, and that's education.
Yes.
We need the skill to engage in dialogue, to be able to engage in sustainable dialogue. Because in my work in conflict resolution, our toolbox of skills for conflict resolution has great tools in it. But the tools that we have, meaning we in the United States, in solving problems, we practice engineering, isolating, mechanical approaches that work for us. But increasingly, conflicts internationally is more about identity conflicts. So we need to expand our toolbox and learn from other cultures how to deal with issues of identity.
Does this lead us to think that interfaith dialogue may really help lead to respect for everybody's belief systems?
Well, I think on that, 2 things. One is that interfaith is really young. You know, in history, there have been a few exceptions, but when I was in the Vatican not long ago, I was talking to a cardinal who's he's in charge of interreligious dialogue, and he said, we've been at this for 30 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, and I was talking to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he said, in the last 7 years, I've had to do a lot of interfaith work. And it just dawns on me what a baby interfaith, interreligion is. We're just barely walking right now.
It is young because until recently, it was believed that there was only one true religion, whoever was dominant.
Right.
No, I mean it.
Yes.
We are beginning to recognize that the human spirit is indivisible.
Interfaith is moving slowly among the religious leaders, and it's moving quickly among grassroots people. People work it out. This is not, interfaith isn't for professionals, it's for amateurs. And the amateurs know what to do. They work it out. And the people at the top of religion don't have the freedom to do that because they have to defend the faithful.
Yeah, it has to do with polishing our hearts rather than polishing our badges. We go around polishing our badges. I'm a Sufi, I'm Christian, I'm Muslim, I'm Jewish, I'm Buddhist. That's polishing the badge. But the divine shines only through polished hearts.
Now you've been sitting there asking us questions.
Can we ask them?
You're an expert on life. So what are you thinking? Now don't be bashful.
I thought, I'm actually going to throw it back to you a little because I thought it was very interesting the other day when you said one of the things that may have an effect on the future of interfaith dialogue and people getting together is that finally people will realize that if we don't do something about the environment and save the world, we're not going to have a world. Definitely. And that's a very interesting thought for me. And I like nature very much. I'm very close to nature. And so that rang a bell for me. And I just, maybe as a last question, I'd ask you both whether you think an unlikely aspect of interfaith dialogue might actually be that every faith is going to feel the need to save their planet.
In our research about the environment in Islam, we found some fascinating literature back in the 10th, 11th, 12th centuries when Muslims were leading. There was one story of there was a trial in the court. This was, and the animals were trying the humans.
Oh, boy.
About
I like that.
That's
The
beautiful.
Nuremberg trial.
That was beautiful. And when we read that, and they were trying them, I'll say, what have you done to us? What have you done to the
Whoa.
environment?
Whoa.
So it seems when civilizations are on top, they begin to look at these things seriously. And definitely, there's hardly a peace program that does not have 1, 2, or more people focus on the environment. It's happening.
I'm really happy to hear
It's
that.
happening.
What was in your mind when you said
Well,
that?
if you look at the Bible and you ask yourself the question, how many things here happened indoors and how many things here happened out of doors? It's overwhelmingly
Out of doors.
out of doors. That is the context of the holy.
Yeah.
You have a book, we have a book, the Hindus have a book, and one book isn't, your book is not my book is not your book, but the holy book for everybody is the earth. And you can see whatever the deep failing of human beings, you can see it in our treatment of nature.
We are beginning to appreciate our ecological function. Trees have ecological functions, birds have ecological functions, ants have ecological functions. Our ecological function is love. When Ibn Arabi tells us, my heart is capable of every form, a grassland for gazelles, a monastery for Christian monks, a table for the Jewish Torah, love is my guiding faith.
Well, I'd like to drink to peace on earth with sacred earth. And thank you both so
Wow.
much for coming today to
Thank
talk about interfaith dialogue and peace.
Thank you for lunch too. Wow, what a
Yes,
cook.
great lunch.
Thank you.